Thanks, Mark. And thank you, Jackie, for that inspirational music and rendition of that lovely, lovely hymn. I'd like to start this morning with the scripture that inspires the message for me and the message which I hope is a blessing. That's my desire and my intention as I read from 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 9, which reads, Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go back and lie down. And it shall be, if he calls you, that you shall say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant hears. And so Samuel went back and lay down in his place. We give thanks this morning with united hearts for the opportunity, the privilege, and the joy of coming together this way in spiritual community to celebrate the truth together. As the words of Samuel have inspired me throughout this week, so did Jackie's selection of the hymn. And in terms of divine order, static or dynamic, it's up to us. It really is up to us. The hymn, at first glance, might look like it's talking about us and our thinking. In fact, for me, this hymn has always been a reminder of God in me through the use and the leitmotif throughout the hymn of God's name, I am. And so I'm very careful in internalizing the power of this hymn to recognize that when I say I am the thinker, I am saying the name of God, and I am in that moment surrendering my thinking to God in me, whose thoughts, as we know, are higher certainly than my thoughts. I thought to bring levity to the situation this morning before going into a powerful, what has been for me, a powerful metaphysical interpretation. I thought I would open by sharing with you that I do not often recall my dreams. And this morning, when I woke at my usual time of 5:30 or 6, I was able to retain the dream that I had just had. What's powerful about it, as I share it with you, is that I can call it a positive thing, a dream, instead of a nightmare. Because for almost half my life, when I had this kind of dream in September, it spoke to the deeply embedded fear of returning back to the lecture hall with a wild bunch of students. And this particular dream has never really left me. And perhaps today was its last appearance, because in my travels, lecturing in different places, once I think it was my very first year, so that's very telling. In this dream, I'm supposedly lecturing English language and literature, but guess what? I'm in a science lab. And when I walk in and I'm ready to teach, the students are standing up on the science lab tables. And of course, I completely lose my cool and ask them the stupid question that every teacher has probably asked. What are you doing up there? Get down from those tables. And of course, I can still remember that sense of responsibility that I felt, thinking, oh my God, that something's going to happen to this scientific stuff that I know nothing about, all because these kids are up on the table and they're old enough to know better, and what the hell is going on? And it was just so refreshing first of all, none of you showed up in the dream, so to me, that's a very good sign. Secondly, there were no faces that I recognized. And thirdly, I woke up from that dream really, truly liberated. So I'm happy to share with you that after many years, really, I can't even think. I have to stop and think. It's either nine years since I left the teaching profession. That dream felt like I have truly let go of some of the most really terrifying scenes that I encountered, sometimes when I was there and sometimes created when I was not there. So this morning I am inspired by the book of Samuel. I am so grateful to be sharing with you something that never ceases to edify me, which connect back to the hymn and connect back also to the prayer that I would like to look at with you metaphysically this morning. So the hymn says, I am the thinker. I am the thinker. So as you heard me say in the introduction, for me, that is an invocation to realize that my thinking needs to be under the governance of my I am. Notice how later in the hymn, the verb shifts from I am the thinker to I have the power. And for me, that's where karma comes in, because the word karma actually just means choice. And so I have the choice to use my small self power, or I can remember that if I am is my thinker, then the power that I have, I choose to access through my spirit, through my spiritual realm. Interesting, the kind of week that I've had also led me to review 3 signs that I use to recognize insanity. Now, I think insanity is an important topic whenever we move into the realm of thinking, okay? Because not governed by my I am, it is very easy for thinking to become insane, okay? So let me share with you my particular definition of insane, having heretofore actually traveled in that land, but my clearest understanding of the word insane now goes back to its Latin root sanus sanum, which means whole or complete or unbroken, right? So to be insane is to have left wholeness. To be insane in my thinking is to not have it under the governance of the I am, first of all. And secondly, to be insane promises that through my small self doing the thinking, I will leave the realm of wholeness. I will not be whole, complete, and God inspired in my thinking. So first of all, so in terms of the signs of insanity in my thinking, the first sign is that if in thinking, I believe I know a thing, okay? So if I'm twinning those 2 verbs in any way, thinking and knowing, I have officially left the realm of sanity, because in truth, we understand that knowing, knowledge, all the faculty of knowing anything is of God in me. It is of the I am. So I'm very careful to notice the trap of thinking that I know a thing, because as I have just said, those 2 verbs are mutually exclusive. So if I'm in my thinking mind, I can't be knowing a blessed thing, as I tell myself. And when I am availing myself of the power of my I am and knowing a thing, then guess what? Thinking has left. So I'm just going to let that really percolate in me before I tell you the other two signs of insanity. Therefore, the first step in recognizing that I have left the land of wholeness in my internal landscape, the first sign is that I am twinning the verbs thinking and knowing. They don't go together. Whenever they do, I can be sure that I have left wholeness, right? So that's the first step. That's the first sign, really, of insanity. The second sign is, and this one's really, really insidious and sneaky and shows up and sometimes hooks me before I even know it has me. If I think that I know what is best for another person, then officially I'm insane. Do you follow me with that? So in other words, the ego in my thinking shows up to seduce me with a pure intention. And it says things like, well, you know, you love this person. And so then the thinking becomes, oh, so I think then that I know what is better for another person. So I'm sharing with you this very intimate part of my journey, that's how ego still can lead me to insanity, is to seduce me by telling me it's well-intentioned. Well, I mean well, I love this person, so I think I know what is best for them. Alarm bells go off. Control, power, that's not spiritual power trying to move in. So first sign of insanity, twinning thinking with knowing. Second sign of insanity, thinking that I know what is best for another person, especially notice when I love them. When it's a person that I love, the hook, as I call it, the Velcro, the trap, can be even more seductive. I'm happy to share the third one with you because after what feels like a lifetime of releasing this third sign of insanity, I notice that more and more I can catch myself more quickly than I can with the last one I just shared. The third sign of insanity is believing or thinking that I know in any given situation what another person is thinking. It's a big trap. It's prevalent in the world of appearance and form. Whenever you have experienced, as I have quite a few times this week, someone else projecting their stuff onto you, right? Then there's the moment of sanity or insanity where I can either bless whatever is coming into my energetic field, or I can go into thinking that I know what that person must be thinking when they projected that onto me. It is impossible, as we can agree, this lovely autumn Sunday morning. Let us agree that it is impossible to know what another person is thinking. And if we think that we know, then we're really in the realm of insanity. As I was thinking about these disguises of the ego and thinking about prayer, I had the great privilege to visit last week the Mother House in the province of Ontario here where I live. The Mother House, which has collected all the remaining Ursuline sisters into the most beautiful residence. The reason I was touring it is because it promises to be the next destination for my mother as she continues her journey. She has been in respite care. The Ursuline mothers certainly have dwindled in numbers. However, I can assure you that I was blessed to see them in the dining room as I was leaving, And at a glance, I knew that there were at least 30, maybe 40 of them gathered. The reason this is important to the message for me this morning is because walking in the front doors of that place is something I've only experienced in other convents and monasteries that I have visited. And perhaps you can share this experience with me that is very much a spiritual one, that is very much as palpable as the nose on my face. That when I walked in, there was an energy in the field. There was an aura or a sense, something intangible, which seemed to pick me up. That's how palpable it was. And so that got me thinking about the power of prayer. It got me thinking about the fact that in one of those moments in the garden, the metaphysical garden of Gethsemane for me this week, when I was tempted to think that I knew what was best for a beloved, I turned to a prayer that we in Unity call a transcendent treatment. There are a couple of you with whom I have been blessed to pray this treatment, this transcendent treatment. And the bulk of my message this morning will be a metaphysical interpretation of the transcendent treatment. Before I delve into that, however, let me share with you some other miracle mindfulness that seeped into me as a result of the beautiful prayer energy. Certainly, the mother house where the Ursulines live is a place of continuous prayer. I believe that any one of us entering a space, an energy where there is contemplative prayer ongoing would be lifted by it. And so even though the last 12 years of my teaching career, I was in a Catholic institution founded by the teaching order of the Ursulines, it was amazing to me that until I took a closer look at the name of this home, Saint Angela of Merici, that I really had no idea who this saint was or why the Ursulines took her as their patron saint. And of course, with my mother having suffered a life of physical pain since she was a child, it certainly was not lost on me when I checked into Saint Angela as the patron saint, not only of sickness, but of disabled and physically challenged people. And then just for good measure, she also is the patron saint of those grieving the loss of their parents. Miracle, a complete and total miracle that felt served up just for me that bright morning this week when I went into that facility, recognizing that this particular icon was certainly meeting a specific need in my family of origin, my mother's, as well as my siblings, who are certainly having their challenges with anticipating the death of my mother and their loss of her. So now I'd like to shift into the importance of this transcendent treatment in my life. I do pray this transcendent treatment for others on a daily basis. It is my go-to prayer when someone calls me for prayer one-on-one. It continues to be symptomatic of my not thinking with my I am, that it has never occurred to me in 25 years of using this treatment to pray it for myself. That in itself is interesting. For when I think about the transcendent treatment, a treatment in truth circles is a way of changing our perception about any given situation. This prayer, which has long been a source of healing and of miracles in the unity movement, is called a transcendent treatment. Let's look at the word transcendent before we go too far into the symbolism of this prayer. To transcend is an interesting word because, of course, we think of it as rising above, but I like to look at the etymology of its root, which is scend, which comes from the Latin verb scendere, scend. It's in the middle of transcendent, right? And scendere is a verb which means to be pulled down, okay? Like to be forced to come down. And isn't that in truth what each of us is subject to when we are stuck in our thinking from our small self? So in a transcendent treatment, what happens is that we rise above that human experience of being pulled down into form, into circumstances, into personality, into conditions. And so I share a metaphysical of interpretation with you this morning that has been transformative for me this week because I finally recognized the need for it to be prayed by me for my small self in my humanity when I fell into thinking that I knew what was better for another person. And I could feel it. It was, it was like a spiritual slippery slope. I could feel myself going into all the reasons why I thought I knew what was better for this person that I love. After all, have I not been on the journey with them for 3 years? Have I not been subject to blah, blah, blah? And I caught myself and I did sit with the transcendent treatment. It was really interesting to me that my first hit, however, was that I was going to say the transcendent treatment for them. And then I paused and I did what Joel Goldsmith admonishes us all to do, which is to create a vacuum. I call that vacuum, as you've heard me say, space for grace. So I stopped and I created space for grace. And that's when I heard, how about you say it for yourself? How about you say this prayer for yourself? Because it sounds like you need to transcend what is trying to pull you down right now, Roz. And so I said I would, and I did. And so before looking at I believe there are only, other than sharing with you an understanding of its title, A Transcendent Treatment, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the teacher who received this prayer. I'd also like to tell you how much of a backbone it formed in ministerial school for those of us who were told about miracles that came through this prayer. But before I look at the symbols, I would just like to pray parts of it with you, and for myself. And so the transcendent treatment begins with this affirmation. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Beloved of God, Unity Church of Rochester, greetings. In my integrity within me, where I know and see as God, I know and see you, O beloveds, to be free, wise, and immortal. I see you unfettered, unbound, triumphant, glorious, splendid. And then it goes on for another 12 or 15 statements of truth, which of course, whenever we pray, we're remembering the truth for ourselves or for another. The prayer ends by affirming, I see you to be the strong child of God, joint heir with Jesus Christ to the kingdom. I see you alive with God and upheld by its free spirit forevermore. All the world sees you as I see you now and evermore. It is done. Amen. So I'm happy to share the bulk of that prayer with you anytime in a written form. I do not know offhand. It's probably available on Google. I just have it stored and I'm happy to send it to you. So let us look at the power of this prayer. Other than the fact that it was received, in my understanding, by a mystic by the name of H.B. Jeffrey, who for a short period of time was very involved with the unity movement. At some point in my learning, which I could not verify in time for this talk anywhere in my research, so if some of you know, maybe you can tell me, I remember learning that he was married for a long time to May Rowland, who for over 30 years, some of you know, was head of the prayer ministry at Unity Village. So let's look for a moment at who H.B. Jeffrey was. He was an architect. He was a New Thought teacher who was very prevalent on the New Thought scene for the first half of the 20th century. He was born in 1872. We will remember the teacher that he co-authored High Mysticism with, who is Emma Curtis Hopkins, the Christian Scientist who also inspired the Fillmores. So H.B. Jeffrey received this transcendent treatment, and it was not until I delved deeper into his inspiration of it that I noticed that he also received a prayer or a treatment called prosperity treatment and healing treatment. So how about next Sunday I look those up and we can look at those. That really excites me. So he did receive this prayer somewhere in the 30s, and it is a powerful prayer that I would like to look at metaphysically with you for a few moments. The depth of it likely eludes me in terms of its entirety. However, I can share with you that each time I return to it, I receive another glimmer of truth. The primary symbols that no doubt carry a metaphysical meaning include Moses, the serpent, the wilderness, the tongue that is referenced in the middle of the prayer, as well as the importance of the eye. In the middle of the prayer, I'll go back to speaking it for another. Beloved of God, I see your eye lit with fire from on high, and I see your tongue tipped with celestial instructions. In looking at the symbolism of Moses, we know that Moses metaphysically represents drawing forth the living waters of truth. And so in this treatment, we invoke the power of Moses to rise above the serpent, which represents man's desire for sensation. So as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so is the power of this transcendent treatment powerful to lift us up from anything that is pulling us into desire, ambition, fear, hope. Those are four new, well, at least three of them feel relatively new for me to be released from: ambition, desire, and hope. And so in using this transcendent treatment, we invoke Moses, who metaphysically represents drawing us into new life. And as Moses lifted up the serpent, representing desire of the humanhood. So as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, and of course, the wilderness is one of my favorite metaphysical symbols because it represents the multitude. Notice that adjective, the multitude of undisciplined and uncultural thoughts. The multitude of them. So of course that brings me back to I am the thinker, because when my thinking is under the governance of I am, it is neither undisciplined nor uncultured. And so as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so is the Son of Man lifted up through the power of this transcendent treatment. What is interesting in Charles Fillmore's explanation of Moses as a symbol of drawing out water, he says in this context, the water represents the power of universal negation. So in other words, in invoking Moses in this prayer, little did I know that much of its power may rise from the idea that in drawing out from the water, its power to negate all negativity universally. And Fillmore goes on to say, out of what are seemingly negative conditions comes new growth by invoking Moses. So I'm going to pause there and just let us internalize or integrate those four symbols from the beginning of this prayer. Moses, the serpent, the wilderness. And then we'll delve into the prayer to some extent in looking at those parts of it which speak to the tongue and the eye. If I am treating self or another, and I say, I see your tongue tipped with celestial instructions, then it seems to me that the psalmist who said, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be pleasing unto thee, O Lord, would be covered by, I see your tongue, or I see my tongue tipped with celestial instructions. May my tongue only be tipped with celestial instructions, especially when I'm tempted to fall into the trap of thinking that I know what is best for another person. And so I prayed this for myself, and then notice the next because of course, metaphysically, the tongue represents the power of the word. And then the next line in the prayer is, I see my eye lit with fire from on high. And so that is invoking my willingness to perceive and to see only with the fire of spirit, only through my Christ vision. And so this powerful, powerful, beautiful prayer continues to some extent mystify me, but I come to it with great and unwavering faith. And this morning, I am so blessed to share with you that for the first time this week, in recognizing it was time to pray it for myself, to do the transcendent treatment for myself, I was able to understand what the teachers in seminary spoke of when they referred to its miraculous, instantaneous power. I was able to internalize for myself its healing power. And most of all, I was liberated by its power from the pull, the tug of thinking, which is always of the intellect, to make space for grace, for the illumination, for truly knowing the truth through my spiritual self. And so in closing this morning, I would be so grateful if you would open with me to the power of the middle of this prayer and its transcendent treatment. It reads, Beloved of God, I see you victorious, undaunted. I see you spotless, beautiful. I see you deathless, abiding. I see you flawless, fearless, transcending yourself and all of your affairs. This is the truth. I name and claim it for myself and for my beloved spiritual community gathered here this morning in the name and according to the nature of our elder brother, Jesus the Christ. It is done. Amen.